You are listening to the Hiking Radio Network, where we talk the walk with shows by hikers, about hikers, for everybody.
Mighty Blue on the Appalachian Trail, the ultimate midlife crisis. Join Steve and his guests every week as he staggers from Georgia to Maine.
Hey guys, good to be back with you all again for another episode of Mighty Blue on the Appalachian Trail, the ultimate midlife crisis. This is episode number 455, and I'm your host, Steve Mighty Blue Adams. Before we get on to this week's guests, I wanted to mention again that I'm going to be heading north on Sunday, November the 3rd, starting work on the Monday morning, helping out at Mountain Harbour Hostel. And to be honest, it looks like there would just be the three of us. Several of you have written to me to say why you're unable to join us, but I'm reaching out again to see if a few of you can still come and help out. I spoke with John Jordan at Alder yesterday, and he said that the hostel still needs help urgently. So that's where we're going to be heading. I know many of you have work, but for those of you wanting to help out in any way, I'd love to have you along with us. Reach out to me at steve@hikingradionetwork.com and we'll set it up. This week we're going to concentrate on the Smokies with my friend Don Robinson telling us how he became a member of the 900 Miler Club earlier this year. Don has been working on this award for several years, though he concentrated more intently on it after he suffered a personal tragedy a few years ago. We're going to hear from Don in a moment. Then we have returning guests once more. Sally Brooks, or Not Yet, hiked the trail 2 decades ago, and when we spoke back in 2020, she was writing a book on her adventure. Oh, the book's here at last. And so Sally. You'll get a kick out of her infectious laugh and humour, and she'll be on after Don. Then the first part of Chapter 12 of Happy Hiking. You've probably noticed that I've recently been presenting chapters over 2 weeks. This is mainly to help reduce the length of each show and, of course, the amount of time I take to edit it. I try to stop at pretty much the halfway point in the chapter so as not to confuse you all when I start up the following week. From your emails, many of you seem to be happy with this, so we're going to carry on with it. So let's learn about what it takes to end up with an award that less than 1,000 people have earned. Here's Don Robinson to tell us his story. Oh, by the way, Don's wife appears to be clearing up in the background every now and then, and much as I try to edit it out, you'll still hear a few weird background noises. Here's Don. We have a guest today who gave me a wonderful present a few years back. You may remember this. He presented me with the MacGyver's Gigapixel wall map of the Appalachian Trail. This is Don Robinson. Hey Don, how are you?
I'm fine, Steve. Thank you for having me on.
That map has been a constant companion for me, and I look at it every single day that I'm home. Luckily for me, MacGyver offered to personalise it as well, so I even have about 50 of my trail pictures and a record of where I stopped every night in the 2019 through hike. I'm constantly seeing stuff, and I hadn't noticed before, so a big public thank you for that. And actually, Don, just before we started recording, showed me he's got a copy of the map also in his house right now, so we've both got a common background. So today you're on to talk about recently earning the 900 Miler Award. Tell us what that award is.
The 900 Miler is actually called the 900 Miler Club, but I call it the 900 Miler Award. But it's an award that was started back in 1995. And it's for people who have hiked all of the trails in the Smoky Mountains, and there are 150 trails there in the Smokies. As you know, the Smokies comprise about 500,000 acres of land and straddle the border between Tennessee and North Carolina. I was just looking at some statistics for the Smokies, and there are 16 peaks in the Smokies that are above 6,000 feet. So
wow.
there's a lot of climbing that goes on, and it's not just on the AT, but a lot of those peaks are on the AT.
And do the 900 milers go to all of those peaks or any of those peaks, or what do they do?
Well, part of the 900 miles is along the Appalachian Trail, of which about 72 miles are in the Smokies. So that's part of the 900 miler award. I will say that the 900 miler name is a little bit of a misnomer, because since the award started back in the mid-90s, they've actually decommissioned some of the trails, and so now the trail mileage is actually about 800 miles, but they still call it the 900-miler award because that's what it was originally.
I know. I love the fact it's a club as well. That's even better. As I understand it, there's still less than 1,000 people who are in that club. Is that right?
There are about 850. I think the last count I saw was 852 people who are 900-miler awardees. And I'm sure there's many more than that who have hiked all the trails but just haven't done the paperwork to get that designation. But you can go on Google and Google 900-miler award and get all the information about that, and you can actually see a list of all the awardees.
Oh, right. That's cool. That's pretty cool. So that club is actually it's actually more select than the Appalachian Trail Club because there's thousands of us who have done that. So that's nothing. So
yeah, it's a pretty exclusive club, and I really didn't know much about it until about 2016, and I discovered that it was there. And having hiked all my life, basically, I'd already done maybe half those trails previously, so I decided it was an award that I could accomplish, and it didn't require me to be away for 6 months. I was still working at that time, and so I decided that would be a good thing for me to try.
So you say you've been hiking a while. What actually got you into hiking in the first place, and was it in the Smokies?
Yeah, I've done most of my hiking in the Smokies. I've done probably 400 or 500 miles on the Appalachian Trail in various sections. Done all of Georgia. We did the Presidential Range back in '85. I've hiked Mount Katahdin. I've done most of Tennessee. So probably about 400 to 500 miles of the AT. But other than that, yeah, all my hiking has been in the Smokies.
So how'd you get into it? How'd you get into hiking in the first place then?
Yeah, well, when I was 10 years old, I wasn't even officially a Boy Scout yet, but I was about to be. And they said, why don't you go with us on the Appalachian Trail? So we started at Newfound Gap it wasn't far from sunset, and we wound up sleeping on the side of the trails somewhere. I'm not even sure where it was, but we hiked as long as we could, and I don't even think we made it to the first shelter there, which is Icewater Springs as you go north. But we slept on the side of the mountain, just threw our sleeping bags out, and
wow!
And
old school.
that was quite an introduction to the world of backpacking. But anyway, I was about 10 years old, and that would have been in 1960, I guess. Wow. And we made it to Davenport Gap. That was a fairly eventful trip for me because I was sick the whole time. I had as we call it in East Tennessee, the backdoor trots. Everybody will know what that means. And
it's not just East Tennessee that will know what that means. It's okay.
or as we say, the green apple quick steps.
Oh, yeah, nice.
Anyway, I was sick a lot of the time, but with the patience of the leaders, I made it all the way to Davenport Gap. And a funny story that sort of comes after that is I had just gotten home on a Sunday, and on Monday morning, while I was gone, my mother had a dream that I had mushrooms growing out of my face. It was a really weird dream, and oddly enough, the next morning after I got home from that trip, I woke up with the mumps.
No! Oh my God!
So my face really was swollen up, So she thought her dream was very prophetic.
And when you actually spoke to me before, you told me that you actually built your own pack. Is that right?
I built my own pack frame. We had an assistant scoutmaster who helped us rivet those pieces of wood together, and there was webbing and curved parts that had to do with the lower part of the back. But there was no hip belt. It was all shoulder borne. And I attached my pack to that, just lashed it to that board, and that was my first pack frame. I could hardly stand up straight. I couldn't stand up straight when I walked out the sidewalk, and I think my mother may still have a picture of me somewhere all hunkered over because that was the only way I could be upright, was to kind of lean forward.
So the Boy Scouts obviously encouraged hiking in those days and instilled that sort of love of hiking with you. Did you go out many times with them as an organisation?
We had a big troop that was heavy on hiking. So we did that trip from the Newfound Gap to Davenport Gap as our first trip. And then within the next 6 months to a year, we did the southern end, which is Newfound Gap to Fontana.
Right.
And we received an award for that. Actually, our council here in East Tennessee had started a Smoky Mountain Appalachian Trail Award. And if you did all the AT through the park, you got this special patch. And our troop was the first troop to get that patch.
Pretty cool.
And then subsequently, I went to Philmont with one of my sons, and he actually did another trip without me that was a 90-mile super strenuous trip. I think ours was about 60 miles, which covered about 10 days of probably 4 or 5 of that was hiking. But anyway, so we went to Philmont out in New Mexico, and when we were talking earlier, I mentioned to you that when I was in college at the University of Tennessee, one of the professors there was doing black bear research, and he would pay us to go hiking in the Smokies.
Yeah, but it wasn't just that. He'd pay you to do something particular, didn't he?
Yeah, I mean, it's the best of all worlds. You get to do something that you love, but we got actually paid minimum wage to go out and hike the trails in the Smokies with one provision, and that was that anytime we came across any bear scat, we had to scoop it up into a plastic bag and bring it back so he could analyze it. And so a lot of the trail...
So as a serious matter, though, he was looking at black bears. Do you ever know what he found from this? Did he share any of his results with you?
There was... Well, other than what they were eating, obviously he could do the research on that with the bear scat, but there was some way that he had devised that he could do a bear census using this information, and I'm not sure how that would work. But his name was Mike Pelton, Pelton, Mike Pelton, and he was a famous black bear researcher at the University of Tennessee. He's now retired. And oddly enough, I had him for a merit badge counselor when I was a Boy Scout. He wouldn't know me right now from Adam's cat, but anyway, he was an expert on black bear science.
It's funny though, isn't it? What different things and people you meet in your life and experiences you take away from. You're still hiking now. 60 years later. So it obviously planted something within you. So after college, I'd say you went hiking with your wife as well. Did she share the passion of the trail that you do?
Yeah, she, in fact, when we were courting, we were both at the University of Tennessee. We took a hiking trip, a day trip up to Spence Field, and we were hiking out of Cades Cove, and she didn't have any hiking shoes, so she borrowed somebody's boots, and actually they turned out to be riding boots. Not the best choice for hiking, but she and I hiked up to Spence Field, and we used to spend a lot of time up there. At that time, back in the 60s, when we were there, the field was wide open, and it doesn't resemble that at all today. It's grown up a lot, and they're not maintaining it as a bald or a field. But the area is beautiful up there. We'd go up there and listen to ball games on the radio and lay in the grass, and it was just a wonderful time on top of that mountain up there.
And you mentioned earlier on you've done about 400 or 500 miles of the AT in sections. Is there a plan? I mean, you're about a year
I'm 75.
Yeah, you're a couple of years older than me. So is there a plan to finish that up or do a bit more of that? What do you think?
I might do some of it. I don't have any illusions about doing a through hike. I think that ship has sailed for me.
You could do it in sections, though. You could do it in sections.
I might could do it in sections. I would like to visit some of the more iconic places. I'd like to see McAfee Knob and some of those kind of places, but I don't think I'll ever finish the trail as such. But I'm what my wife calls an AT groupie, because I follow a lot of podcasts, and I also have several YouTubers that I follow each year, and I enjoy it vicariously through them. But yeah, we hiked a lot back in our younger days. Back in the 80s, we did all of Georgia. We took our family on one trip and hiked around Standing Indian Mountain back south toward Bly Gap there.
That funny-looking tree, yeah.
Yeah.
It's very strange. That is an iconic spot for a start.
It sure is.
So you were building up your Smoky Miles, more of a hobby and a bit bits and bobs here and bits and bobs there. But then in 2016, something happened that was a catalyst for you to take the 900-mile award more seriously. Can you tell us what that was?
Yeah, unfortunately, our youngest son passed away unexpectedly, and we were actually out on a day hike in the Smokies when we got that news, and it was certainly the worst moment of our lives. But I got the text from my daughter, call us immediately, and when I was talking to her, my wife was looking at my expressions, and then when I hung up and gave her the news, she just sat down on the trail and wailed, as you might expect a mother to do.
Of course.
And we walked back down the trail to our car and went back into Gatlinburg where we were staying, and checked out and headed home to make the arrangements and all. But that was sort of a tough time for our family, and I decided, after I found out about the 900-miler award, and it felt like that was something that I could achieve, that it might be something that would give me some peace. I find a lot of peace in the mountains and hiking, and I thought, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do it for our son, dedicate my efforts to him, and at the same time, it'll be healing for me as well.
I'm sure. And when you're out there, is he constantly? Did you feel him constantly with you? Does it feel like that's his place as well as yours?
Yeah, he was an outdoor guy too. All three of our sons were Eagle Scouts as I was, right. And so they all grew up in the outside, and our family camped nearly every weekend when they were growing up. So he was an outdoor guy, and we're that kind of a family that enjoys water sports and hiking and camping and anything outside. So yeah, it was. I feel his presence out there. Some of his ashes are spread in the Smokies.
Nice.
We miss him a lot, but it's been 8 years now, and fortunately, my daughter, who's our oldest child, adopted our two granddaughters that he had, and so they're growing up, and they're now in junior high and high school.
Cool. So you decided to take it more, I say more seriously because it's still hiking, so, but it's something you had as a goal. But you'd already done about half by then, is that right?
Probably half of it. Yeah, I got the spreadsheet, which you can access from that website that I mentioned earlier, and you can actually see the 150 different trails that are in the park and that are still open. Right. And I looked at those and I thought, I've done almost half of these, and if I set my mind to it, and I can finish this off. And so it's taken me 8 years. Part of that time I was still working, so I had to do it on weekends or holidays.
Sure.
And it's about a 2.5-hour drive from my home in Cleveland, Tennessee, up to the park. So it was possible for me to do a lot of day hikes. I hiked some with my sister, who likes to hike but doesn't like to stay out overnight. I also hiked with one of my old fraternity brothers who's retired, and he had already finished the 900-miler award.
Sure. And
he hiked a lot of it with me. And then I met quite a few other people out there who would help me on hikes with shuttling and go with me. And some of those trips I made by myself, And it's always more fun to go with somebody, I think, especially once you get to camp and there's nothing else to do.
Yeah, well, I like sitting there reading. I'm pretty good at doing that. And are they normally day hikes, or are there many overnights involved as well?
You can do the thing in day hikes, but some of those day hikes would probably be 20 miles or more, which is a little much for me. I think the longest hike that I did was about 17 miles. And mostly I like the 10 to 12 mile range. So as many of those as I could, either in loops or day hikes, I would do. And then those that would exceed 10 to 12 miles, I would usually stay out at least one night. I think 2 nights maybe it was as much as I have stayed out at a time for this award.
And it's not a straightforward way of hiking, is it? You told me sometimes you've had to hike the same trail several times to get to the trail you wanted to do next. Has anybody ever worked out, that you, as far as you know, an optimal route where you cut down the number of overall miles?
Well, there have been people who've tried to do that, and I think one of your previous guests, Nancy East,
yes.
who did the fastest known time, along with another gentleman, Chris. I can't remember his last name, but anyway, they worked out what would be the most advantageous routes. But of course, they were doing 30-mile days, which is way beyond my capacity. But there's a book. There's a book by a lady named Liz Etnier, Etnier, who did the trail several years ago. And the book is entirely about day hiking all the trails in the Smokies. And she thinks that she has come up with the most efficient way to do that. And so if you get that book, and it's still available, it will outline each hike, and you can maximize your time and minimize the amount of repeat trails that you have to do. Most people who get this award usually will hike between 1,000 and 1,500 miles to do the 800 miles that you have to do to get all the trails.
Do you know how many you've done? Have you worked out how many you've done?
I never kept up with it, but I can tell you that I probably have just about started on the second map, and probably have half of those trails done too. And some people do multiple maps. And when I say a map, we're talking about the trail map that the Park Service puts out. It's called the dollar map. That's what everybody calls it. But it's basically the map that you can get at the visitor centers that show all the mileages and shelters and campsites. And that's the official map for the 900 miler award.
So do you have to follow the spreadsheet and fill that in, and do you have to prove you've done it, in other words?
For the first map.
All right.
So with the first map, you have to put the dates that you hiked those particular trails. Mm-hmm. And with that spreadsheet, I just kept up with that. And I would also take a Sharpie on the map, on the dollar map, and outline the trail once I had finished it. But the first map is the only one that you have to show documentation. Right. If you do other maps, and I think there's maybe somebody who's done like 16 maps.
Wow.
In other words, they've done this 16 times. But after the first map, you don't have to document anything. You just tell them that you've done it, and you don't have to do anything else. And they just make a note on the page that lists all those people who've done it. And they might say 2x or 3x or 10x or how many ever times that you've done it. And there's a $15 charge for the first map, but there's no additional charge. There's no additional dues. There's no additional fees after the award is given. And for that, you get a nice certificate. You get a bumper sticker and a patch that you can sew on your pack.
Nice.
And all those things are listed on that website.
And you say that you finished it this year. When the year started, how much did you need to do to finish it? Because you obviously knew you were going to finish it this year, I presume.
Yeah, I think I was down under 40 miles to finish it. So I tried to get as much of that done as I could. And then I still had one small trail that I sort of saved for last because it was adjacent to one of the campgrounds. Right. And we decided that we would camp there the night before I finished. And it's a tradition among the 900 milers for those people who've helped you or those people who've supported you in some way to come out and hold their trekking poles up in an arc, like you would walk through a bunch of sabers if it was the military, and that's the ending of your 900 miler. It's called the hiker tunnel.
Is that your Katahdin moment then, effectively?
Yeah, it probably will be. I've done Katahdin, but
I know you said you'd done Katahdin, but there's a thing about finishing a hike, isn't there? And even though it took a number of years, there's still that thing of there's a spot at which you've done the miles, and that's a special moment, I would think, and especially for you, considering the connection with your son. How did it feel to you when you got your Katahdin moment? Yeah,
it was surreal. It was a lot of people talk about that. I've listened to your podcast for years, but it's one of those happy and sad things at the same time. It's an ending, but it's a sad ending in a way because you're glad that you got there, but I'm going to miss it because I probably won't be out there as much, and at least I won't have a goal in mind unless I decide to do another map. I'm trying to get my wife to get interested in doing one, and I would probably do it with her, but if she doesn't do it, I might help somebody else do it. I've made so many friends on this quest. I've got people that I hike with from Indiana. I've got people that I hike with from South Carolina.
It's a great leveler. Every time. It doesn't matter who you are, where you're from, what you did. When you're on a trail, you're just two people hiking, aren't you?
Yeah, and it's I've got a whole new set of friends that I've made just because of this. And when somebody else is going to finish, if I'm available, I'll go out and be part of the hiker tunnel for them. And by gosh, they showed up for me too, and that was cool. Wonderful. It was great.
And what is the infrastructure like out there in the Smokies, away from the AT part of it? I know what that's like. Obviously, there are shelters at fairly regular intervals. What's the rest of the Smokies like in terms of shelter availability and campsites?
There's only one shelter off the AT, and it's Laurel Gap Shelter. It's over on the North Carolina side, but it's the only shelter that's off of the AT. So when we would camp overnight, there are about 100 or so campsites scattered throughout the Smokies, and you still have to get reservations for those, just like you would if you were hiking on the AT, to get a reservation for the shelters. But there's a website that you can get on in the Park Service and tell them how many nights you want to stay. I think there's a two night limit 2 nights in a row that you can stay at the same campsite, which I have done. If I would get to a campsite and then I would have a side trail that I wanted to do, I would just set up my tent and then go out and get there the first night, but then day hike the second day. Back to the same campsite, so I didn't have to make 2 trips. But yeah, there's probably 100. I'd say 100 or so campsites throughout the Smokies, and they all have different capacities. Some of them have horse tie-ups, and some of them are foot traffic only. Right. But it says that on the website that you have to do to make your reservations.
So are you one of these guys who would turn up at 11 o'clock at night in a shelter and chuck us through hikers out and make us go camp outside? Is that the guy you're talking about?
Well, you have to have a reservation to stay there. I know. You guys look at it the other way around. We have to have a reservation, and you don't. You can stop at any shelter you want, and with your through hiker permit.
We have to get out though. We have to get out. We have to. That's the official rule. I can tell you. I met several people on the trail who would never have moved. Whatever anybody said.
Well, I know, and most of the through hikers don't like that about the Smokies. I've been hiking up there for 60-something years, and I've never, ever seen that happen. And I've come across many through hikers, but I've never seen that happen.
A number of us actually, because I went obviously in through hiker season, so it was going to be busy. It was going to be overflowing anyway. So I didn't want to be chucked out. So I actually set my tent up outside, even there were only 5 or 6 of us in the shelter at the time, because I knew it would fill up, and it did fill up, and I was in my tent. So it's a pain though. It's a kind of a pain though. But you know what? It's such a great place to hike. I think I still love the Smokies as well. That all of that is worth it. And as you say, I never saw any of that thing when somebody shut us out, really. But we were told you would have to move if more people turned up.
Yeah, the people with the reservations have the priority, and that's unfortunate. But I think a lot of the thru hikers would rather sleep in their tent anyway. Yeah. And there's something to be said for that. You don't have to deal with the mice and all that.
Sure.
But right. You asked me about the other trails off the AT.
Yeah.
And most of them are pretty well maintained, but I think you'll see a lot more blowdowns. I've crawled over, I know one trail I counted like 24 blowdowns in about 8 miles.
Oh, dear.
So it was not pleasant. And some of them you could hike through, and some of them you had to hike under, and some of them you had to go around. But it was, a lot of those other trails, especially this time of year in the late summer and the fall, are very overgrown. I remember one trail, I couldn't even actually see the trail, and I kept thinking, I hope I don't step on a snake or something here, because I couldn't even see my feet. It was just, and the grass was chest high. And between worrying about ticks and worrying about stepping on a snake and putting my foot where I couldn't see, it was not pleasant. But this time of year,
keeps your attention done.
Yeah, this time of year, a lot of those trails can get overgrown.
So if this, and I'm sure it will appeal to some of our listeners, can you tell us a few things you might have done differently over the years, maybe that would have saved you a few miles? I mean, how do you go about starting a plan? You get the spreadsheet, obviously, but you're looking at a spreadsheet. How do you know, is a spreadsheet accompanied by a map so you can see where the adjacent trails are?
Not really. It's just an alphabetized spreadsheet, basically. And it gives the mileage, the total mileage for the trail, and it also gives you the breakdown mileage for the trail intersections. So if there was another trail that came in from the side, it would give you the mileage going to that side trail, and it would also give you the mileage after the side trail. So you can, if you happen to do part of that trail, you can still check that off there on that spreadsheet. But yeah, it has the partial mileages of all the trail intersections as well as the total miles. But yeah, what I would usually do is just try to find an area of the park, and then I would work that area because I would be more familiar with it. And many of those areas I had hiked at least some of those trails before, so I had a passing knowledge of those, but I didn't know all of them. And I would just usually look at the map and decide, what can I do? What would make a good 1 or 2 day hike? Or can I do this in a loop and just come back to my car? Or do I need to have a shuttle and have somebody pick me up at the other end? Or that was one of the advantages of hiking with my fraternity brother, is we would drop his car one place, and then we would shuttle to the trailhead and then drive back to his car, and so on. I think
the way my brain works, I would need that book by, what's the lady's name?
Liz Etnier, Etnier. Yeah.
I'm going to find that book and put a link in the show notes. And the reason I am is because my brain wouldn't allow me just to turn up and do a bit of it here and do a bit of it there. I'd need to know what's the best way to do it. So not so much to knock these out the way quicker, but more efficiently. So I think I like the idea of an efficient way of doing it.
Yeah, that book has been invaluable. It's got maps and it's got the mileages and all that.
Cool.
The other book that you can't live without in hiking in the Smokies is called Hiking
in the Smokies.
In the Smokies, and it's sold at all the visitor centers there, and you can also get it on Amazon and some of those other bookstores. I think it's probably about $20 maybe or something like that. But it lists all the trails in the Smokies, and it has a profile map. It has the water crossings listed on there, how many water crossings you have, whether some of them could be dangerous at high water and virtually impassable or whatever. And then, of course, it has the mileages to the shelters and other points of interest.
Well, look, congratulations for doing this. I mean, it's I say it will screw my brain a bit because I'd have to work out a way to do it, really. But it sounds a fantastic thing to be able to do as well. You've got this beautiful part there, and the fact you can actually go there and do it, and you've gone there and done it. I think congrats for doing it, and thanks for coming on the show and telling us about it.
Well, it's been my pleasure, Steve, and I've enjoyed listening to your podcast for many years, and I could hope to continue to do so. And appreciate you having me on.
Well, episode number 450 is out next week, or as we record this on September the 3rd. But, okay, man, well, look, great to talk to you, and stay well, and we'll catch up soon, okay?
Okay, I hope to see you again at Trail Days.
Cheers then. Bye.
Bye-bye.
What an interesting and very accessible target that is. And the fact that Don was quite open about his son's tragic passing and the motivation he took from it to finish the job must have made it very much bittersweet when he was able to get it done this year. And I love that tradition at the end. What a way to celebrate joining quite an exclusive club. The two books that Don mentioned in our conversation, I've added links in the show notes so you can check them out. Now let's meet up again with Sally Brooks, who was writing a book the last time we spoke. 4 years later, is here. And here she is to tell us about it. Well, we've got a previous guest on the show, Sally Chaffin Brooks, back from 2020, rather. She was on the show in August 2020. She's come back. Hey, Sally, how are you?
Hey, I'm doing great. It is so good to see you again. I mean, not much has changed. What was going on in 2020? I can barely remember.
virtually nothing. Yeah,
virtually nothing.
my girlfriend keeps saying we lived through a pandemic. Isn't that amazing? You know, it's kind of an amazing thing that we all did. Now,
it is good to remind ourselves of that every once in a while.
It is.
To be
it is. Yeah.
Let's not forget that.
Yeah, it was serious stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now you. Incredibly, considering how you look now, people can't see you right now, but you hiked the trail over 20 years ago.
I did.
Back in 2003.
I was a baby. I was the youngest baby to hike the trail.
I think you must have been. You must have been, yeah. And I know that, and I'm thinking back, and I've got my notes, you actually met your now husband on the trail.
I did, yeah.
And that is quite something, I guess. What did I haven't re-listened to it, but I've got my notes here. What did the friend you were hiking with think about you taking up with a young man on the trail?
Luckily by that point, we were hiking in a group. So it wasn't like I just was like, hey, see ya, I met a guy. But I was hiking. I was hiking with my best friend, who is still my best friend. And when I met my now husband, we were with a group there were about 6 of us. And she loved him too. So she was all for it.
Oh, there you go.
And she's just, she is that good of a friend that even though I was, very, very quickly falling in love and ignoring her, she was like, great, go for it, do it. And
that is a proper friend.
We've been married for now almost 20 years. So
isn't that amazing? Isn't that amazing?
Yes.
And I'm kind of wondering, you told me before you were writing this book and it was almost done.
Yes.
And now 4 years later, it is at last done.
It is at last out in the world. It is. I will tell you what, when I talked to you in 2020, I think I had just finished my first draft, or I was almost finished with the first draft.
Yeah.
And I had no idea about the publishing process, how long it took, all of the complications with it. But I have learned a lot. I have learned a lot in the last 4 years.
Have you enjoyed it though?
I am now enjoying it. So the book came out September 10th. And I would say up until then, it was a lot. I was, working really hard on promotion. I loved the writing process. I loved writing this book. It is one of those things like you have hiked the trail, like,
sure.
Or anybody who has done any kind of adventure, the ability to do it again through writing was, I mean, it's like I got to relive that experience that was obviously so meaningful and so special to me through writing. And so I loved the writing process. It was the editing, promotion, all of that, you know, kind of negotiation, like doing the cover, doing the interior, like that stuff was the promotion really has been the hardest part. But
the editing is a nightmare. I did hike again in 2019. I still haven't written that book yet, even though I got a title for it, funnily enough. Right. And it's called Going Again, but that's
that's the first part. That's the hardest part.
There you go. And but the editing, when I wrote my book about my 2014 through hike, I wrote 250,000 words, and I had to cut it down by 100,000 words. My editor said.
That is wild. Yeah. I mean, everybody's like, your book's pretty long because it's 350 pages, but it was 95,000 words. So I can only imagine the tone. Like you were Game of Thrones.
I was talking about the smell between my toenails and things like that. So trust me, I went into much more detail than anybody really wants to hear. So you've written it and you've done all those things. Mm-hmm. How did you remember it? Because the days tend to blur, or did you keep a journal the whole time on the trail?
I kept a journal. This was, again, I hiked 20 years ago. So before cell phones, you know, we didn't have anything to distract us. So when we were at camp at night after we ate, you know, and chatted, everybody journaled. And so I'm so lucky that because I'm not a natural journaler, but I kept a really good journal. Also because my best friend was there, she also had a journal. So she was a very helpful resource. You know, and we're still good friends with a lot of people, and we have a big group of pictures. And so I was able to really recreate a lot of it over the years.
Do you find though, when you do that, when you look at a picture, it takes you back to that spot? Or even if when you read something you've written, it takes you back to that spot. And I remember I podcasted in 2019, and I can remember listening to myself on that podcast thinking, oh, I remember this, which I don't even mention in the podcast. It's kind of weird how it just takes you, isn't it?
It is. I mean, when I look at, like, I am looking over to the side because some of my journals are just sitting right here.
Right, there you go.
Because this is where I will write, and I can I can remember the smells. I can remember when I doodled. I remember how I was sitting, where I was. It is such a sense memory. Do you have that with I have songs that I listen to on the trail, and when I hear them now, I am right back there
all the time. I actually gave evidence in the High Court in the UK once about as a it sounds terribly off at a tangent, as an expert witness in a case, and they showed me my handwriting from 20 years before.
Wow. And
that, because I'd written some notes, I remember those notes, and I remember what they meant as well. And I was able to give that explanation because I'd written it. It's that tangible thing that's there. So the book you've written, is this the one because you've always intended to write a book, hadn't you, this book?
Yeah.
So is this the one you intended to write, or has it been informed by your life since the trail?
I really tried to be in that 25-year-old mindset when I was writing it. But I do think that in the process of writing it, and who I have been, who become since, has definitely informed the themes that things I didn't realize that I learned and have incorporated into my life.
Sure.
From the trail. I'm like, oh, oh, wow. Okay. I don't think I had the perspective at the time to know oh, I did this hike because I was at a point in my life where I felt very stuck, and I felt very unsure. I could see the path of my life, and I wanted to have more of a wide open life than that. And so the reason I did it was kind of to blow up my life a bit, and in the best possible way, right? In a way that yes. And to open it up to kind of the possibilities of you don't have to just do this one certain path of life, get a job, have a baby, get a house, get married, whatever, those things, even though I have those things now, I just didn't want it to be certain. And so that is really struck me as I was writing it, those things were and just the freedom to know, oh, I did this one really hard thing in my life, And that has informed my ability to like just the confidence to do other hard things, whether I succeed or fail.
I think that's the thing that comes across from most people when they do this. They realize they can do difficult things, which they never had the confidence to do before. When you were writing it and then you were reading your notes and so on, did you ever think, oh my God, I did that? Really? Did anything surprise you, in other words, about you back then?
I think, I was, I'm just impressed by how audacious I was at that age, that we just, without any of the modern conveniences that we have, not that it was like so long ago, but really we were like using payphones. We just quit our jobs at 25 and left and just went and hiked in the woods for 5 months.
That's no big deal now, is it? The kids nowadays, which I love, by the way, these youngsters, I'll get another job. It's not a problem. But in the time you went, that was kind of an important thing to still have a job, wasn't it?
It was a huge deal. I mean, I don't come from a family with a lot of money. And so there wasn't, it wasn't like I knew I was going to be financially supported when I came back.
Sure.
And, I had just graduated from college. I'd been working for maybe a year and a half. And I think at that point in time, we were really taught, like, you go to college, you get your job, and then you start your career, and that is it. That is what you do. And it felt like a real risk to quit and hike the trail.
What a wonderful risk. What a wonderful risk.
I went back last year. I was invited to come back to the university I went to Purdue University, and to be what they call an executive in residence, even though I kept saying, like, I'm just a comedian. Like, I'm not, I don't exec anything. I don't, but I got to talk to a lot of students. And that was the thing I just encouraged them so much, was that you are going to find the most reward out of the risks you take, and not this like narrow path you see for yourself right now. Like, let yourself zig and zag. And that is where you're going to find the most beauty and the most fulfillment, because, we often don't know ourselves as well as we think we do, or we have expectations of other people on us. And so, I don't know. I'm sure who wants to take the advice of like a middle-aged mom, but I mean, I didn't when I was that age, but
absolutely
nobody, even though
how bad it is for an old guy.
Yeah. I do know a thing or two, but nobody cares.
That's right. So as you mentioned, you're a comedian, and you do stand up.
Yes.
Still, where do you do it?
Wherever they will let me do it.
Fine. And I presume you brought that into the book, because certainly the reviews I've seen that certainly mentions that. Because I'd imagine the comedy has come from what you've learned since those times as well. So I suspect that it's it's probably exacerbated, as it were. The whole thing made that the whole thing a story you tell, but you tell it out of a comedy standpoint, which it's an observancy thing, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, and I think I was also really lucky that like the people I was with were, I mean, we were young people on the trail. We had a lot of like real funny and sometimes scary, predicaments. Like we were, and I think that like, I think that comes across both in my own experience and in the writing of like, we were out there, we had a lot of fun and we did this amazing thing, but we also didn't take ourselves too seriously. And I think that the camaraderie of it is what I really wanted to like, I wanted people to feel that, because that I think was for me, the most valuable thing on the trail was that group of people that I met and who I saw myself as when I was with them.
Have you, do you still think about it most days?
Yeah. Well, now, of course.
Of course, you're writing. Of course, yeah.
Yes. But even before, yeah. I mean, obviously, like it doesn't hurt that I married a guy from there. Then
that's
so
right,
and so that's it's a very real experience. We live pretty near the trail. We're there often, and
nice.
Yeah, it's funny. I had a friend, and they were like, the only thing I don't like about people who've hiked the Appalachian Trail is that they won't stop talking about it. And I'm like, I know. Yeah. Look at me. 20 years later, I wrote a book.
That's the advice I give everybody who's just finished. I say, remember, you've got about a 3-week window to tell all your stories.
Right.
After that, they couldn't give a crap. They wouldn't shut up.
Cares.
Now, the book is called Going to Maine,
Yes.
And I should mention to people, it's also available as an audiobook, which Sally has narrated. Have you narrated yourself?
I have. Yes, I have.
All right. Okay. And Sally has generously said that she would offer a copy of the book to somebody. Now, the thing is, Sally, you've got to give me a question, and I haven't prepared you for this. So
okay.
what I'm going to do is either pause the recording or you come up with a question now that people can answer. What do you reckon?
Okay. A question, like a quiz question? What kind of question?
A question about the AT or something about whatever it was. I'm not really sure.
Okay, here is my question. What is the challenge that thru hikers do in Pennsylvania that has to do with food? I want to know, what is it called?
There you go.
The
correct answer, and I will be shocked if anybody gives a wrong answer on that one.
It's pretty easy, but
it's not the pizza challenge, although that was a thing sometimes as well. The year I was there. So where can people get the book if they don't win the free one from you? Where can they actually get it?
You can get it at any major bookseller, Amazon, Target, Barnes & Noble. I recommend, if you want a physical copy, to order it through your local bookshop or at bookshop.org, because then the money goes to a local bookshop. But
nice.
You can really get it anywhere. So it's available ebook, audiobook, or a good old-fashioned paper copy. So
cool. Okay, so well, look, lovely to have you back on the show, and you're looking incredibly well. And
thank you.
Best of luck to you and your hiker trash husband. And I'm sure he's no longer hiker trash.
But, no, he's a boring professor now. So.
There you go. All right. Well, good talk to you. Okay, and I'll let you know where to send the book once I find who the winner is.
Yes, please. Awesome. Thank you so much.
Cheers. So, if you'd like a copy of Sally's book, just email the answer to the question she posed. I will be utterly shocked if I get any incorrect answers. Remember, the question is, what is the challenge that thru hikers do in Pennsylvania that has to do with food? There's not going to be a great deal of head scratching out there, so when you have the answer, email me at steve@hikingradionetwork.com and I'll pick out the winner from among the correct answers. I may even have an award for any really good incorrect answers. With what we hear from Emily Leonard's book, Happy Hiking, I want to catch up on some thank yous from those of you who support the podcast. Now, I haven't done this for a couple of weeks for fairly obvious reasons, but I wanted to catch up today because you know how much it means to me. Our recurring donors are, and this is quite a long list at the moment, James Boyd, Michael Gosh, Kevin Eastman, Small World IFT, Ann Dobson, David Santi, Alan Troy, Jens Lepahida, Lisa Rana, Brian Helton Jr., Paul Chevelle, Woody Bass, Natisha Webb, Ninka de Huss, Gail Posey, Galloway Johnson, Todd Withrow, Suzanne Johnson, Betty McEnany, Ann Pickin, Sharon James, Sean Deadwiley, Emmanuel Bravo-Ramos, Kevin Weidman, Brian Alsop, Emily's Escapades, Glenn Ferguson, Jessica Diaz, and Bruce Brinker. That's a lot of people who step up every month, so my thanks is as regular and as heartfelt as your support. We also got a couple of very generous one-off donations from Barry Hill, Nicola Moore, and the lovely Dr. Lynn, who wanted to dedicate it to the honour of her dad, who recently passed. We're going to hear from Lynn in a few weeks as she tells us how important her dad was, inspiring her to love the outdoors so much. Finally today, Emily is reminded again and again how lucky she is to have Bruce on her team as she hikes further north. I'll see you next week. Chapter 12. Homeless. While I was going through my gear, a hiker exited the trail and asked Bruce for a ride to town. I had stuff to do and we were waiting for the rest of the gang, so Bruce helped him. They took off, leaving me to go through my belongings in the parking area. A county sheriff pulled up slowly to investigate. He asked if I needed any help. I told him I was fine. He left to patrol the rest of the pot, then returned, asking me again if I was okay. I reassured him I was. He asked again. I then told him I was a thru hiker and my hubby had just gone to help another hiker and would be right back. Apparently the sheriff was concerned that I had been abandoned and wanted to know if I needed a ride to a shelter for women. I chuckled and thanked him for his kindness while reassuring him I was fine. After he left, I chuckled to myself again, wondering just how destitute I must have looked. Then my heart went to feeling sad. We never really know how good we have it until we open our eyes and look around. The sheriff's concern for me made me realise not all women are as fortunate as I am. I gave thanks to God for giving me a wonderful husband who delighted in my goals and dreams as much as I did. A small tingling stirred in my soul as my love for Bruce grew even more. It wasn't long until the gang reunited at the beach. No one else swam, but we did take a snack break with Bruce before continuing on for the day. Walking Man, GQ, Ryan, Pumpkin and Smoothie hiked ahead. I would eventually catch up. First, I needed to repack all my extra gear to load back into the car. It was still strewn all over the ground in the parking lot. Possessing an abundance of stuff is comforting and comes in handy when you need it, but with owning more possessions comes more responsibility. Instead of being content with what I carried on my back and enjoying the beautiful spot with awesome friends, I was knee-deep in trunks, totes and bags. Eventually, I finished repacking and was also reconsidering having so much stuff. Bruce drove ahead, then hiked south to meet me at Iron Mountain Shelter. Less than a mile after leaving the recreation area, I called up to Smoothie and Pumpkin. "If you don't tell her, I will," Pumpkin said to Smoothie. She looked at me with pain in her eyes and said, "I have a really bad rash and I don't know what to do." The wet conditions over the past week, especially the drenching before and after Roan Mountain, had everyone dealing with skin issues, but Fruit Smoothie had the worst chafing I had ever seen. I flinched when I saw it and tried so hard to hide my concern, but I failed. The tops of her inner thighs were so raw they looked like fresh hamburger. I had known she was uncomfortable, but I had not known how bad it was. The baggy shorts she switched to did little to relieve the pain. We had 15 more miles to go for the day, and there was no way she was going to be able to do that. Continuing on would have risked deepening the wounds and or infection. I was able to reach Bruce by text. He was still close and returned to the swimming area where we had left him earlier. The kids backtracked and Bruce drove them to town, where Fruit Smoothie could buy what she needed to heal and hike more comfortably. The remainder of the day was a pleasant hike with GQ, Walking Man and Ryan. Sometimes I would hike alone, sometimes I would be blessed with the company of one of the guys. Usually, GQ blazed the way out in front and the three of us trailed behind. Ryan often kept pace with GQ, but by the end of the day, he was dragging. GQ, Walking Man and I had over 400 miles under our boots, but this was only Ryan's third day on the trail. To make matters more challenging for him, he had no hiking poles and was carrying a pack loaded with gear and all his camera equipment. Before this hike, I'd never used hiking poles, not even when I went snowshoeing. One summer, when Bruce and I were climbing Katahdin, we saw some hikers using hiking poles on their descent, and they seemed to effortlessly glide over the rock scrambles. Bruce and I said if we ever climbed the mountain again, we would use a pair. I did some research, asked around, and decided on a pair of women's Black Diamond Trail Pro Shock trekking poles. They were my best friends out on the trail. We still had a few miles to go before we reached the shelter, but Ryan was tired, hungry and low on water. He and I stopped for a rest. I shared my snack, energy cubes, energy-enhancing supplements and water. I couldn't do much, but it was all he needed for the final push to the end of the day. As we left our little break area, I handed him my best friends to use for the last few miles. When I arrived at Iron Mountain Shelter, Bruce was already there with the rest of my hiking family. He'd hiked southbound from the parking area at TN91 with Smoothie and Pumpkin. GQ, Walking Man and Ryan arrived before I did. They all welcomed me like I was an Olympic champion finishing my leg of the relay. I was home and not homeless, at least for the night. The seven of us set up our tents, randomly dispersed among the trees surrounding the shelter. It was a fabulous spot. The shelter was basic, but the area around it was level, dry and soft, a real treat. After I set up our tent and took care of my miscellaneous tasks, I delivered trail magic. Bruce had packed in honey buns and orange juice for everyone. He had already passed round a six-pack of PBR, Pabst Blue Ribbon. Everyone knew who the real trail angel was. Bruce always made me look good. Rumour had it that hikers tolerated me because wherever Black Bear was, Bruce and all his kindness were close at hand. Ryan remained in his tent. He'd climbed in shortly after setting it up. It's quite normal for a hiker to disappear once reaching camp. We all like to withdraw to our own space for various reasons, but quite a bit of time had passed and he hadn't re-emerged as he had the previous 2 nights. I knocked on his tent to see if he was interested in a honey bun and orange juice. He unzipped his tent just wide enough so I could pass him the items, graciously accepting the offering without saying a word. He zipped the tent back up and we never heard from him until morning. I secretly giggled at him. I knew he'd be okay. He was at the spot in his discomfort where all of us had been 400 miles ago. Once I had delivered the treats, it was time for me to indulge in mine. Bruce had packed in a Subway sandwich for me. I placed my footlong on the picnic table, situated under the shelter's overhang. Several other hikers sat in the shelter, and all eyes were on me. I was taking my knife into my hands as I proudly and teasingly unwrapped the sandwich. I slowly ate all the contents held within the roll and left the soggy carcass bun on the wrapper, since I don't eat anything made with wheat. I turned to the hikers with their puppy dog eyes and asked, "Do any of you—" I could not even finish the sentence before they all replied, "Yes." After an evening filled with trail magic and extra beverages, nature called in the night. Both Bruce and I took a little stroll to take care of business. Thankfully, this midnight potty break was uneventful, not like our first nighttime escapade back at Springer Mountain. Upon returning to the tent, I could hear Smoothie rustling in hers. Then she called to me in a hilarious kind of panic. A mouse had run across her face, waking her up. She heard me and called out. She wanted help making sure the little critter was no longer inside. We laughed and squealed like little girls as we emptied the contents of a tent looking for the rodent. Once we were positive it was gone, we returned to finish the night's sleep. Oh, the joys of wilderness camping. Morning came early. Bruce and I were packed up and on the trail by 5:55 a.m. We all wanted to make Damascus, Virginia by the end of the day. Damascus is a small town with a population of 1,000 plus. It is home to Trail Days, the largest event on the AT, with presentations, hiker reunions, music, gear reps and retailers on hand to assist hikers. We would be arriving a month before this event, so there would be no partying for us until we returned later. Many hikers do take a leave from their through hikes to attend Trail Days. I had no desire to do so. It was a pleasant morning, even with the drizzle. The easy terrain was an added bonus, and since I had continued loaning Ryan my hiking poles, Bruce shared one of his poles with me. We reached the vehicle quickly. From my resupply in the car, I grabbed minimal food for the day. Bruce would be meeting me somewhere the AT crossed a dirt road to hand off a midday, calorie-boosting Big Mac and fries and a few extras, in case I couldn't do the hoped-for miles. Damascus would make a 26-mile day, my longest if completed. I gave Bruce a hug and a kiss, he gave me both poles, and I was on my way. At some point during the day, I called Bruce to confirm I wanted to push all the way. The rain was coming down harder, and I didn't want to stay in the woods that night. We also confirmed the rendezvous point for my power lunch. I hadn't eaten fast food in years, but felt the need for it that day. I did not have enough calories for a 26-mile day. I was looking forward to my 2 all-beef patties, special sauce, lettuce, cheese, pickles on a sesame bun. The rain had intensified along with the wind, and the temperature was dropping. The mild start to the day was long gone, and misery was settling in. Our rendezvous was at McQueen's Gap. I arrived ahead of Bruce and found a tree to stand behind to protect me from the elements. The skinny timber did little to divert the driving rain from buffeting me. I was cold, wet, trembling, and Bruce was late. I called to check on his ETA, and he was 20 minutes out. I dreaded the wait in the cold, but needed the food. I did not have enough to continue the hike to Damascus, nor did I have enough to spend the night on the trail. I could have done it, but it would have been pure misery. The shelter was only 1 mile away. I put failure in my brain, conceded I would not make Damascus, and waited behind my toothpick tree for Bruce. Through the wind and rain, I faintly heard a voice, "Mama Bear!" I looked up to see Fruit Smoothie and Pumpkin Butt exiting the woods. I told them I was waiting for Bruce and a Big Mac, and that I had decided to stay at the shelter. They were heading on to Damascus, 11 miles away, and encouraged me to join them. I lacked confidence in my ability, but they built me up and said they would share their food. I called Bruce and cancelled the drop. The 3 of us rallied together and headed up the hill, singing and laughing at the rain. I no longer felt so incompetent.